So today we're going to talk about Jesus, and we're going to talk about him as the one who heals us. And I know that every time when we talk about this, I don't talk about healing a lot. I don't teach about healing a lot, not because I don't believe in it, not because I don't believe that Jesus does it, not because I don't believe that God often does heal people and circumstances. It's just not one of those things that I don't talk about it too terribly much. No good reason. I just haven't done that over the course of my ministry. Which, by the way, doesn't seem that terribly long, but this morning I have we're talking about 90s music, and my 7-year-old said to me, she's like, that's music that old people listen to. Like she was wrong on that, correct? Right? Okay, yeah, she was wrong. Okay. Anyways, I just haven't talked a lot about it, but I wanted to talk about it today because I don't think you can read through the story of Jesus and not come to the conclusion that that's one of the things that he did a lot of. Like Jesus did a lot of healing, and I'm gonna show you a good amount about that just a little bit. But before I actually did that, I just wanted to say that whenever I talk about the matter of healing, I'm incredibly aware of the fact that I'm healthy, and I don't struggle with any diseases. I don't have any sicknesses that have broken me down physically or mentally, although that's debatable. I don't have anything that's just like really wrong, right? And I have a healthy family. And my family has been blessed with health, and so I know when I talk about this kind of conversation that that's the context from which I speak about it. But I will say this: when I talk about healing and what Jesus can do for us in terms of healing, I speak with compassion because I have had the opportunity to preach the funeral of many friends, and I've had the opportunity to hold in my arms husbands and wives as together we watch their spouse breathe in their last breath. I've cried with a mother and held her in my arms as she just shook inconsolably, and then she got in her car and went away, and I went inside and cleaned up the remains of her son after he had committed suicide. I have had the opportunity to hold in my arms a father, and we stood together and watched his infant breathe its last breath. And I've had opportunities like this, and so I've spent time with men and women who struggle and wrestle with questions of sexual identity, and I've had opportunity to spend times with men and women who had fresh cuts on their body as they tried to deal with abuse and haunting memories, and I've had the opportunity to spend time with young people who are working through eating disorders, and on and on and on. And so when I talk about healing, though I haven't personally experienced deep brokenness that has to do with death or physical disorder, I've experienced my own level of brokenness, but I've also been very closely involved with friends and family. As a family member, I've been involved with people in a pastoral capacity who are broken and just devastated. And so when I talk about healing, I talk about it as one who has seen it, who has cried with and even shed tears over these kinds of things that I believe Jesus wants to address in our life. And so as we move into this, I just want to say up front that we talk about healing, I don't think it's limited to a physical arena. I mean, when we think about healing, we're like, yeah, my elbow hurts, I would like to be healed. And I think that's something, right? But I think that healing is bigger than just a physical thing. I think that there are probably even those in this room that need an emotional healing. Like you've been damaged, you've been wounded, you've been broken emotionally, and you are in this need of healing. I think there are probably people in this room who are in need of relational healing. You've had a relationship that's either broken or is getting ready to break, and at some point you need some kind of healing in your life. Maybe it's a financial, maybe it's a spiritual healing. But my sense is this, and if you're going to take notes, this is the first thing I would just like to say to you. I'm going to be working with two assumptions today, and the first is this: you are unhealthy in some area of your life. Like every single person in this room has unhealth in some area of your life. It might be spiritual, physical. You might be wrestling with emotional fear, or you might have abuse or haunting memories you're trying to overcome. It might be a physical thing that you need healing in. It might be a spiritual, a financial. But the point is this: I would bet $1 that every single person in this room has something that, if you're honest about, you need to be healed Something that's broken that desperately needs healing. Now, the second point I want to make, the second assumption is this. Unhealth, ignored, gets worse. So that thing in your life that needs healed, that is the relationship or that physical thing or that emotional thing, if it's left alone, if it's ignored, it will get worse. So I remember when Sherry and I first, we moved into we had just been married, and we had been a pastor in Cincinnati, Ohio for 2 years. We'd been a youth pastor, and then we went to Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and that was our first church, first place that I ever had to teach every Sunday and was to be a pastor. And I remember there was a young lady. She was pre-adult, and she had this thing where, like, this is crazy, but she just didn't brush her teeth, like, ever. Just didn't brush her teeth. And Sarah and I, like, beyond the fact that that's like, hey, good to see you, like, that's not good. And so you kind of watch this thing over time, and you're like, that's not healthy. Like, that's not healthy to brush your teeth, is it? Right, like we have to tell our kids all this all the time. No, you really do need to brush your teeth. You need to brush your teeth. So this young girl did not brush her teeth and there was not a parental influence that insisted upon it. So did not brush her teeth. And then months turned into years, and years turned now into a couple of decades. And the last time we saw her, her teeth are all gone, rotted, completely gone. Crazy. Now, that's obviously a ridiculous, we're all like, well, duh, if you don't brush your teeth, they're going to rot and you're going to lose them. I know that. Yes, that's of course we know that. But did you know that same principle applies to any area of unhealth? Unhealthy habits, unhealthy addictions, unhealth in our life, if it's left unaddressed, unhealth in our life will get worse. Some of it may be as obvious as your teeth. Some of it may not be as obvious, but I promise you, if there's unhealth in your life, that area in your life right now that needs healing, if it continues to go unaddressed, it will absolutely get worse. So, let's talk about healing just a little bit. I want to kind of give a paradigm for healing, because I think that it's possible to get better and not be healed. So, for instance, if you have a headache, what do? You take an ibuprofen or a Tylenol or whatever you take, right? You take something and the pain goes away, but does that necessarily mean the problem's gone? See, I think it's possible to have the pain go away and the problem still exist. It's possible to get better without necessarily getting healed. So, the first thing I would just like to say when we're talking about healing is, and this is in your notes, the way you understand healing, the way we define healing, depends on how we understand our purpose in life. Like, why am I here? So, for instance, if you see your purpose as being happy, then you're probably going to define healing as the elimination of sickness. So, in other words, if you believe, like, if you go through life and say, hey, really the thing that I want in life is to be happy. I want to have a lot of fun, and I want to be as trouble-free as possible, and I want to laugh a lot, and I want to have a good time, and I want things just to be well. I don't want to have to struggle financially, or I don't want to have to struggle emotionally. I just want to be happy. If that is how you see your purpose in life, you believe that you're here to be happy. If that's how you see life, then you will define healing as the elimination of sickness. So anytime that a sickness comes into your life, or a problem comes into your life, or trouble comes into your life, you will define healing as the elimination of that thing that takes from your happiness. I just want to be happy. Just want to be happy. The problem, I think, though, is that, again, it's possible to remove the pain and not address the problem. Let me give you a couple illustrations. It's possible to remove the pain of debt by filing bankruptcy, but you've not dealt with the dysfunctional spending habits. I think it's possible to have a toothache that's taken care of, but you have not dealt with the disastrous eating that got you there in the first place. I think it's possible, and I've seen it, and you probably have too, to have the cancer gone, but still have a heart that's filled with anger and bitterness. So the pain is gone, but there's still a fundamental problem. So, if on the other hand, you see your purpose in life is to be helpful, then you probably define healing as the development of yourself. In other words, you would say, hey, listen, the reason I'm here, the reason that God has put me in this world is to help other people, is to do good for others, is to bless others, is to make other people's life better. Then you will probably think about healing in terms of, how is this making myself better? You know what's amazing to me? I think about the people who have been the most helpful in my life, and as I think about them, I realize they have gone through some really incredible pain. Some of them have had the pain removed, but they've been a better person because of the pain. Others have not ever had the pain removed. They've continued to live with the sickness, or they continue to live with that dysfunction, or they continue to live with that pain, but that pain has actually made them a significantly better self, which enables them to help others significantly more than they would have without the pain. And if you would talk to people like that, you probably know some. They carry pain in their bodies. They carry pain in their heart. They carry pain in their mind. But they see that pain as a blessing that they can actually use to bless others. You know people like that? Yeah. So as we're talking about that, I want to keep that kind of in mind, that there's two ways to view healing. One is, if I see the purpose of my life is to just be happy, then when I talk about healing, the first thing I'm thinking of, I just want the sickness gone. The second way to view healing is if I see my purpose in life is to be a helper, my understanding of healing will change a little bit in that I want to be healed from the inside. I want my character to be better. I want myself to be better. And if the sickness goes away, that's awesome. But if it doesn't, I still want myself to be better. So, let's talk about Jesus. It's not possible to read through the biographies of Jesus. We have them in our Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were written by 4 of his friends. These are guys who had spent time close to Jesus. They knew him well, and they wrote his story and ended up in our Bible. If you read through his 4 biographies, you cannot read through them without coming to the conclusion pretty quickly that Jesus did a lot of healing. Now, one of the things that Matthew, one of his close friends, said about Jesus was that he cast out evil spirits and with a simple command, and he healed all the sick. And then he said, this fulfilled the word of our Lord, the prophet Isaiah, who said, Jesus took our sicknesses and removed our diseases. This is what Jesus does. He comes in and he heals our sickness, right? Removes all of our diseases. This is what Jesus does. Now, there's so much I could say about this, and I don't have time. We could preach an entire 8 weeks on Jesus the healer. And so what I want to do is I want to give you 8 different ideas that I found as I read through the Gospels that talk about Jesus the healer. And if you're interested, you can do your own further research on this. I'm not going to talk a long time about each one. I just want to make 8 different points. When the stories of Jesus are talking about him as a healer, they make these 8 different points. They're in your notes. You can see them. I would encourage you at some point to do some further study on this. But let me just show you what the biographies of Jesus say about him as a healer. The first is this. Trust in Jesus is normally part of the healing equation. So anytime you read through the story of Jesus, anybody that's healed, you will find that at some point they made a decision to trust Jesus. Now, this is not an uncommon thing when it comes to healing. Anytime that we ultimately find ourselves better is because we've trusted the advice of a doctor, the advice of a counselor, the advice of a coach. At some point, we trust the input, we trust the capacity of someone else to make us better. As you read through the story of Jesus, one of the things that you'll find is people oftentimes that were healed as a result of their trust in Jesus. They said, this is a guy who I think can make me better. Not only can he potentially remove my sickness, not only can he potentially heal my emotional pain, but I think he can make myself better. He can really heal me. That's the first thing I believe you'll see as you read through the stories of Jesus. The next thing that you'll see about as you read through the biography of Jesus is this. Jesus has compassion for the sick that often moves him to heal. Jesus has compassion for the sick. So, for instance, Matthew said this about Jesus. He had been out touring. He was in a boat. He was moving from one spot to another in his ministry. And Matthew said this. Jesus had landed, and he saw a huge crowd, and he had compassion on them. And what did he do? He healed their sick. Jesus saw, and so when I read this, it's kind of cool to me because all of a sudden I think about every sick person that I know, and I know this at a minimum. When Jesus sees the sick people, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, Jesus sees and has compassion on them and may often, in fact, heal them. If not at a minimum their self, he may in fact heal their sickness. This is one of the things that Jesus does. Third thing we see as we move through the Gospels. Jesus can heal what others are not able to heal. Right? So, for instance, Luke tells this story. Luke, by the way, was a doctor who was a friend of Jesus, who wrote a biography of his. He talked about a woman who was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She had been to see the best in the land. No one could heal her. She came up behind Jesus, and she touched the edge of his coat, and immediately her bleeding stopped. So Jesus is able to heal what oftentimes no one else can heal. All right, another point. Jesus doesn't always heal. Now we struggle a little bit with this one. So, for instance, this is written by Luke again. Said the news about Jesus was spreading all over so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be what? Healed. Like they're like, this Jesus, he's healing people, he's doing incredible stuff, and I'm sick, and I'm going to go to Jesus, and maybe he'll make me better. But look at the very next sentence that Luke writes. Look at this. But Jesus often withdrew. All these people, they're sick. They're hoping, if I go see Jesus, he's going to make me better. So they go and they see Jesus. He's going to do it. He's going to make me better. And then all of a sudden, Jesus goes away and prays. Now, I've had this experience. We had several different times, but one in particular, I remember there was a lady in our church. Man, we prayed and we prayed. We'd bring the church together. We'd pray for healing. We went to healing conferences. We prayed. We fasted. We begged God. We'd anoint her with oil. We'd do all the things that every church person has ever done. And you know what happened? She died. And I don't know why. She would have been a great person to have around. And I look around the world and I'm like, God, out of all the people you could have taken, you took her? Like, I could name a ton of people that you should have wiped out, not her. That doesn't make any sense. But as I read through the Gospels, I see this about Jesus a lot. He doesn't always heal, at least physically. Right? Sometimes, the next thing about Jesus, sometimes healing is immediate. Sometimes we just pray and boom, it's gone. Maybe some of you in this room have even had that experience. You've been sick, you've had an issue, you've been struggling mentally, spiritually, you've maybe been depressed. You prayed, boom, healing was immediate. Like, for instance, look at this. Matthew says this, there was a demon inside of a boy. He was demon-possessed, and said his father brought the boy to Jesus. Jesus rebuked the demon, and the demon came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Like, sometimes Jesus does that. Sometimes he doesn't heal at all. Sometimes he heals instantly. And then there's this. You read through the Gospels, you see this. Sometimes healing occurs over time. Sometimes it just takes a long time to get better. So, for instance, once there were some people who were infected with a skin disease called leprosy. And this disease would ostracate them socially. They weren't able to interact with their families, with their friends. They were stuck off in a faraway place for fear that anyone else would get that contagious sickness. They came to Jesus. And Jesus said, look, here's what I want you to do. Go show yourselves to the priests. And the priests at that time had the capacity to proclaim you healed. And look at this. Say it with me. As they went, they were cleansed. It didn't happen immediately. That healing did not happen instantly. It happened as they began to move. It happened as they began to travel. And sometimes Jesus heals us that way. Some of you in this room have had that experience. You've prayed and you prayed and you prayed. And over time it seems like things got better. And then there's this. Sometimes healing just doesn't happen when or like we think it should. One of the saddest verses, I think, in the biographies of Jesus, one of the saddest, is when his friend Lazarus died, and Lazarus' sister was standing there, and she said these words to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, our brother wouldn't have died. If you'd have been here, We wouldn't even be crying. We wouldn't even be having this funeral. We wouldn't be doing this if you'd have been here. If you know the story, Jesus went on to raise him from the dead, but it sure seemed at that point that Jesus hadn't healed him when he should have. And then finally, there's this interesting thing that we see when we read through the stories of Jesus, and that's this. Sometimes healings happens in your life because of someone else's faith. Like, it's very possible that in this room there's someone who doesn't even have enough faith to reach out to Jesus. Did you know that it's possible that you could be healed as a result of someone else's faith? So, for instance, Matthew writes about a time where a mother came to Jesus and said, "My daughter's really sick. Can you please heal her?" And Jesus said this, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." Read this next line with me, please. "And her daughter was healed from that very hour." Her daughter didn't ask for anything. Her daughter didn't ask to be healed. Her mother asked. And there's multiple stories like that throughout the Gospels. So, those are the kinds of stories we hear about and see about Jesus, the healer, as we read through his biographies. Now, the truth is this. No matter how he heals, or if he heals, the issue for us as Christians, if you're a believer, the issue is this: will you trust him? Will you trust him to be your healer? Will you trust him to make things better in your life, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, financially? Will you trust Jesus? I mean, we've just seen sometimes he heals immediately, sometimes he doesn't answer your prayers, but he'll answer someone else's prayers for you. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it happens in ways that we don't anticipate. Sometimes it seems like he's gone to lunch. The question is this: as followers of Jesus, will we trust him even when we don't understand him? Will we trust him to genuinely heal us? See, this is, as believers, this is one of the things that we've discovered, and it's this. When we trust Jesus, he heals us and he makes us helpful. Sometimes he takes away the physical pain. Sometimes he takes away the mental pain. Sometimes he takes away the depression we deal with, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes he lets it stay. But he heals us from the inside out. He heals ourselves and actually makes us more helpful. Let me just share with you. There's a gentleman named A.W. Tozer. Some of you may have heard of him. Some of you may have not. He's written a lot of stuff that have been resources for Christians over many years. And he said this. He said, "It is doubtful whether God can greatly use a man until he's deeply hurt him." It's doubtful whether God can greatly use a man or a woman until he has deeply hurt him. I mean, think about this. If you're really struggling, maybe you have cancer, or maybe you're struggling with depression, or maybe your relationship is falling apart and your marriage just doesn't look like it's going to make it, who would you rather have by your side? Someone who struggled with cancer? Someone who struggled with depression? Someone whose marriage is falling apart as well? Do you not think that they could offer you the best help? So I think through this, and I think, like, who could better help the parent of a special needs child than a parent who has raised a special needs child? I mean, is there anybody better equipped to help someone navigate their way through bankruptcy than someone who has actually navigated their way successfully through bankruptcy? Dave Ramsey, for instance, right? Is there anybody better at helping someone successfully navigate divorce and come to a healthy place than someone who has actually done it themselves? Is there anybody better to help someone who's going through the pain of abuse or even molestation than someone who has actually been through that themselves? Rick Warren, recently, the last couple of years, his son was struggling with depression. If you don't know Rick Warren, he's one of the most famous pastors in America, has written The Purpose-Driven Life and multiple other books. And he lost his son. His son committed suicide as a result of just incredible depression. And he committed suicide. And Rick Warren, as he was reflecting on that, he wrote this. He said, look, and obviously as a parent he's grieving deeply, but he said, don't waste your pain. Like, you have pain in your life as a result of your sickness or your depression or your relational fall aparts. Don't waste that pain. If you hide it and you hold it back, it doesn't do any good. But if you're honest with God and yourself and other people, listen to this. God can use the things that you hate most in your life. God can use the things that you're most disappointed by. God can use the things that you wish had never happened. God says, look, you can't change what happened to you, but I can use it for your benefit and for my purposes to help other people. When you're willing to share your brokenness, I can use it to help other people, God says. And in that is one of the places that we actually begin to find healing. It's amazing what Rick Warren has done after his son took his own life as a result of a deep, dark depression. His son committed suicide. Rick Warren has since then really begun to focus the church at large across the nation, across the world even to some extent, on the role of mental health. It's incredible how he has used his pain. God used him. He began to heal himself. Is Rick Warren still struggling with deep grief and sadness? Absolutely. But God has brought healing to himself, and through his pain now, he's actually able to minister to millions of people. Because what A.W. Tozer said is exactly right. It is doubtful whether God can greatly use a man until he's deeply hurt him. And the truth of the matter is, I remember when I first got out of college, man, I'd been married for like 2 years, and I really thought I knew how to do marriage really well. And I looked at the rest of you who were married for like 10 years and you were struggling with marriage. I'm like, you just haven't figured it out. Let me tell you a thing or two. And I didn't have any kids. And I thought, man, if I were a parent, I'll tell you what I'd do, right? And I knew how to parent. And I thought, I hadn't struggled with any kinds of depression or anything like that. And I thought, when I saw people struggling, I thought, man, I'll tell you what I would do if I were in that situation. And the list goes on. And now I'm married 19 years, and I realize, man, I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did. But the truth of the matter is I might actually have something more helpful to say than I did when I was married 2 years. And now I have 6 kids, and I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did, but I might actually be able to offer something more helpful than when I had no kids. And now I've had to wrestle through my own mental dark places. And while I may not know as much as I should, I sure could probably offer better counsel than I did before I had ever gone through those dark places. Because the truth of the matter is, when we go through the points of sickness, when we go through the points of pain, sometimes God heals us by removing those things. Other times He allows us to continue to struggle with those things, and He heals us on the inside. He heals ourselves so that we can better help other people. If I see my purpose in life as being here to help other people, then I see my sickness in a different light. St. Paul did that as well. He was a man who had struggled through dark places mentally, spiritually, physically, and he begged God to heal him. And God, after he'd wrestled with God, God finally said, look, I'm not going to heal you like you want. You're going to continue to struggle with some of these things. And so Paul wrote this: Praise be to the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort. This is the prayer of a man who was struggling with emotional pain, who wrestled with physical brokenness. He said, this is the God of all comfort. And then look what he said. He said, He comforts us in all of our comforts. Read this with me, please. So that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. See, as Christians, one of the things we believe about Jesus is that He will heal us. And sometimes that healing might include physical healing. Sometimes that healing might include emotional healing. Sometimes that healing might include financial or relational healing. Sometimes it might include that. But all the time it will include, if we trust Jesus, it will include a healing of the self. It will give us something on the inside that we never could have experienced. It will give us a strength. It will give us a wisdom. It will give us a compassion on the inside that we never would have experienced had we not been inflicted with the sickness or the pain, or had we never gone through the dark place. Jesus heals us on the inside. He heals ourselves so that we can be helpful to others. And sometimes He heals our physical and the outside. And for that we always give Him praise. And so what I've realized these days is I think about healing, and I work through some of my own stuff, and I watch some friends, and I watch people who I love navigate through various levels of sickness and various levels of need. I'm beginning to pray things like this: Jesus, heal me and make me helpful. Jesus, heal them and make them helpful. And I look through the scriptures and I find things like this, and I'm going to invite our band to come up, because in just a moment we're going to sing a song and we're going to ask Jesus to be our healer again. But I read through the scriptures and I see things like this. In Psalm 143 or Psalm 147 verse 3, speaking of God, it says He heals the brokenhearted. He binds up our wounds. He heals us on the inside. Psalm 103.3, He forgives all my sins and He heals all my diseases. He starts the healing on the inside. He makes myself better, and the healing flows from the inside. Exodus 15:26, God says this about Himself. He says, I am the Lord who heals you. And so this morning, and just as we're talking about Jesus, I just want to ask in this room that as we begin to think about Jesus, we think about Him absolutely as our healer, but we begin to think differently about His healing. And that is that it comes, first of all, and most importantly, a healing of the self, a healing of our brokenness on the inside, a healing of our hearts, a relieving of the anger and the bitterness, a relieving of the cynicism, a relieving of all those things on the inside that just eat us alive. You see, it's possible to have the physical pain gone, but still be an angry, depressed, frustrated, bitter person. Are you healed? It's possible to have the pain gone, but the problems still remain. And Jesus says, listen, here's what I want to do. I want to really heal the pain. I want to really heal the heart. And from that, let your healing flow. Because when we're broken, we're then at a point where God can most likely use us to help other people. And so, Father, this morning, as we begin to process this, one of the things we know about you is that you're a healer. Like you do. You heal people. And sometimes you heal us physically. But all the time, God, if we'll trust you, you heal our hearts. All the time, God, if we'll trust you, you heal us from the inside out. You make us helpful to those around us. St. Paul experienced that. He said, now, even though I continue to wrestle with my physical and my mental things that I wrestle with, I've found that I can be a comfort to those who need comfort because you've healed me on the inside. You've made myself better. And now I'm better equipped to help. Father, I pray that in this room this morning, for every single man and woman in this room, because, Lord, at some point we all need a healing. Pray this morning, God, that as we sing this song, that perhaps someone would make a decision to look to Jesus as a healer, to look to Jesus as the one who could make things better. You know, we look to doctors, and we look to coaches, and we look to bankers, and we look to therapists, and we look to counselors to make things better. But Jesus said, I can help. So maybe this morning, God, in this room, there will be one who will say, I'm going to turn to Jesus, and I'm going to give him a shot. And this morning, guys, I just want to do this. We're just gonna stand together. We're gonna sing this song. Talk about Jesus, the healer. And so as we stand, would you do that with me, please? If we stand, and this morning, if someone would just want to take a step out and make a move of faith, we don't do this a lot, but maybe you're in this room this morning and you say, I'm going to make a decision this morning to look to Jesus to be the one who brings healing into my life. Would you just come up front and stand with us? And by standing, you'll do this. You'll say to your friends and you'll say to those who love you, who are standing around you, I'm making a move and I'm trusting Jesus today. And in doing that, you'll elicit their prayer support. You'll elicit their love. It'd also be a physical sign to God. I'm here. I'm open to your healing. In Jesus' name.